everybody. I'm so delighted that you have taken this dreary Tuesday evening, pre-vice presidential debate, to spend some time contemplating a very, I think, sunny and hopeful topic, which is amidst the most beautiful setting that we could probably have on a dreary day like today, which is amongst the art of Sophia McCrocklin. I'm Jeanne Braha, the Executive Director of Creek Conservancy, and it is my distinct honor to introduce Sophia McCrocklin, who is, as evidenced by what you see around you, a very accomplished artist here in DC, but I think first and foremost is neighbor extraordinaire to Rock Creek Park. Sophia will regale us in a few minutes with the story of what inspired this incredible artwork, as well as some of the specifics of how she makes it, which is really something to see. But I want to first express my appreciation for the ways in which Sophia appreciates Rock Creek Park, sees the forest for the trees, and the trees for the forest, and the seeds for the trees, and so forth and so on. And has the ability to really bring together people who think about these challenges in so many different ways. And my job at Rock Creek Conservancy is to bring support to Rock Creek Park so that we can make it, so we can have this event in 50 years with the future forest, right? Instead of having our forest fall away. And we could not do that without great Rock Creek stewards like Sophia, who helps bring people together and rally community and support for these really special places. So thank you, Sophia.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
I should also mention that Sophia is an accomplished environmental attorney. She is a graduate of a fellow Seven Sisters College, Smith College, and now a full-time artist, much to our great enjoyment. So, Sophia, it's all you.
Yikes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. This is probably, I work, like for 4 years to get all this work together, and one of the things this work can't do is to actually speak. And so this is a really important night for me because I get a chance to tell you all what this is about, and actually I'm not going to tell it all. I have wonderful people here who help me learn about the forest, and this gives you all a chance to learn from some of the best. So, one of the things she wanted me to start with was why? How did this come about? This exhibit. So about 4.5 years ago, I had finished another body of work, which was a whole series of ferns. I documented all the ferns at Rock Creek Park Conservancy. I was their artist in residence. And then after that, I'm like, oh my God, so many ferns. Okay, now what am I gonna do? And I was really kind of sick of the color green. So I was just like, okay, 4.5 years of green, what can I do now? But I really wanted to do something that spoke to the forest. I wanted to try to use my, to the best of my abilities, my artistic strength, to try to have people look at the forest a little differently. And I also, I live right next to the park, as Jeanne mentioned, and the park is struggling. And so how do I communicate both the beauty and the fragility? And I'm just racking my head. I'm just been looking at the ferns, and so I'm just like, kind of a little despondent. Where am I going to do now? How do I do this? Because that's a big thing. How do you bring all this together? And at that time, there had been a drought, and the maple trees outside our front door were just raining down maple seed leaves. They were everywhere. They were all over our driveway, all over our front door, in the living room, dining room, kitchen, staircase, second floor, in our master bathroom. I'm like, oh my God, this is way too much. And then I'm really kind of getting irritated about it. And I'm thinking, well, they are kind of playful. And then I remembered as a kid, you kind of drop them down, and I became like more of a kid again instead of thinking, okay, this is really obnoxious. I have to clean them up off the floor and be responsible and all that. So I just kind of thought, okay, well, the forest is trying to talk to me here. It's coming into my house and invading. Maybe I should think a little bit harder here. And I had learned from my experience with the park over the time I've been here, that if you want to learn the story of the forest and where it's going, look on the forest floor. Well, the forest floor was coming into my master bathroom. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should go outside and look at the forest floor. And then I'm thinking, okay, what is this showing me? So I collected a couple samples of these, they're maple seed pods, but the real name is Samara. So I learned that too, I didn't know that. It was a big learning curve here because I didn't really study botany in college. So I was asking about the forest, and I had known Jeanne for a long time, and she was telling me about some plans that they had with forest resilience framework. And I had talked to Adrian Higgins, who had written the Washington Post column in the garden section, actually. And he was saying, oh, you're interested in the forest floor. Maybe you should look at City of Trees, this book. So this was just a book in my studio for a while. I didn't know Melanie. Now I'm so honored to know Melanie. I could not have done this show without Melanie, because this book actually helped me realize, oh, that's a sugar maple Samara. You know, because a tree doesn't talk, right? It doesn't say, oh, this is mine, that's a Norway maple. Oh, no, that's a sugar maple. I had no idea. And a lot of times you'll see books and they'll have the picture of the leaf, but they won't have the picture of the fruit. And so anyway. And I learned you can eat these, but I really wouldn't suggest it. The seed pods in the center there apparently are edible. Anyway, so I went along this journey, and this was my attempt to try to show the beauty and the fragility of the forest. And one of the things that's missing here is there are no seedlings or saplings. No. And that is because the forest they don't have so many, and the problem is it is losing its ability to regenerate. So how do we do that? And so in this journey, I had a chance to work with all the people here and their staff, and I'm just so grateful. So anyway, one of the things people want to know before I go any further and start passing the torch here is how do I make these? And I've got a gentleman over there that's going to start helping me show how this is done. So I go into the woods, I look around at what's going on, and I pick up some things. And eventually I find a specimen. So I take this, I get it scanned. I scan it, and then I have it printed large scale. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio to what you're seeing on the left. And so from here, I actually go to the herbarium, or I look at the herbarium online. The Smithsonian Museum has the National Herbarium, has lots and lots of specimens. I look other places for specimens, and I sort of make sure I don't have a weird leaf. I want to make sure that I know what I'm looking at, and then I might make adjustments. Like, for example, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, this is good because it's not completely yellow yet, which is what I really want to do. I really want to show what it looks like when it's yellow, but I need to do the veins. Those veins are really hard for me to see, even when it's blown up like this, if they're all yellow. So this was helpful, so I could see that, and I could then recreate it as I did the way it looks in the forest now. Now, people say, thank you, I appreciate you holding that up, Mike. You can put it down now. So using that, after I've looked at the specimens online or at the National Herbarium, I then have this big print made, and then I put it flat on my big work table. I make a pattern. So, and then each leaf is different. No leaves are the same. The leaf back there has 30 some odd pieces to it. This leaf here, the Norway maple, 1 plus the stem. Okay, they're all engineered differently, and you have to look at the plant and figure it out. Then I make a pattern, I sew it by hand and by machine. I use this stuff. I don't know if any of you all sail, but this is a sailboat sail. I go to Annapolis, I buy what is called junk sails, and then I cut them. And it's great fabric. Well, for certain things, you cannot shred it. But when you cut it, it doesn't shred. It doesn't fray. But if you sew it wrong, you're doomed. So it doesn't heal. It's like you got a hole in it forever. It's super tough. That's why they make sails out of it. It's 100% plastic, woven plastic, tough as nails. Okay, so after I do that, I make the whole three-dimensional object. I put it flat, I paint it. And I use that and it's painted flat, and I use that big print to see sort of, okay, what is it I want to include here? What is it, what's going to be real? How am I going to communicate this? And the idea, again, is to create something that you walk into as if you're walking into a microscope, which is what they use at the herbarium. It's what Alice back there uses when she works for the Smithsonian, being an illustrator, which is, those microscopes are so awesome. And anyway, so it's like you're walking into the microscope, except for I don't have one, I have a big picture. And then after that, I mount it on a large piece of canvas that I paint, and the background of these are intended to represent the city of Washington. These are my impression of a cherry blossom, I don't know, bundle or whatever. So anyway, so that's kind of my explanation of why and how. And then the next thing, oh yeah, this is, sometimes I make little mock-ups because I can't figure out how, I can't take questions now. Sorry, Catherine. But anyway, sometimes I make mock-ups because they're just so complicated. I'm like, how am I going to do this? But anyway, before I get too carried away, I want to be mindful of our time here so that you all get a chance to learn from the people that I learned from. And I mentioned Melanie's book. There's another awesome book she wrote. 10th anniversary year, a year in Rock Creek Park. If you ever want to indulge yourself in something fabulous, take a peek. Anyway, and she's also a certified forest bather teacher, and she's done a wonderful book called Wild Walking. Actually, she has many, many books, and they're all fabulous. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift, or just want inspiration about the forest when all the leaves come off the trees, there you go. But I want Melanie to please very kindly tell us, if the forest could talk, it would say, please tell people about how the forest is actually one community and that it talks to itself. And a lot of that talking is underground.
Goodness, thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Josh and Brian. I'm really honored to be up here tonight. And I have to say, when I walked into this room tonight and saw the American beech leaf, the sugar maple leaf, all the leaves, the samaras, the sassafras, the ferns behind me, the white oak, I was just, I felt the way I feel when I walk into Rock Creek Park. And you know that first moment when you step onto the trail and all of a sudden you're in that amazing canopy of Rock Creek Park, the oldest urban park in the country, urban national park in the country, twice the size of Central Park and a whole lot wilder. And I know all of you love the park and are wonderful stewards of this park. What Sophia wants me to talk about is how the new science and just, I think, a new sensitivity in general about plants and a new interest in plants, but there's a lot of scientific research now to back it up. We have learned that a forest is not just a whole lot of competing organisms. The trees communicate with each other. They share the canopy. They share information and nutrients through their roots, through these fungal networks that their roots are connected to. They emit chemicals into the air. If one plant is attacked by a pathogen, it can alert its neighbors to beef up the protection that leaves, that the leaves of trees can create to battle all kinds of threats. But like you said, the forest is resilient and it's also really fragile, and it depends on us. And I think about how fortunate we are that we have this community of human beings who love Rock Creek Park. And when we go into that park, we're among friends. We're among our human friends, and we're among our plant friends, and all our animal and bird friends as well. And it's just a meeting of two communities when we go into the park. One of the things I love about the park is that on a weekday, especially if it's raining like it was this morning, you can walk into Rock Creek Park and have a solo experience. You can have incredible solitude, peace, solitude, and serenity walking among the beautiful trees. And then on a lovely weekend, you can go into the park and there will be throngs of people speaking 10 different languages and children enjoying themselves immensely. And I love the fact that we can have it all, but this park depends on us, and I'm so grateful to all of you up here and all of you there that are taking such good care of it. And now may I please say some specific things about your art that I love? I know she doesn't want me to embarrass her, but I just have to say, I'm a naturalist, so when I walk in here and I see these dazzling, way larger than life leaves, and I see how it shows people about the grandeur in one leaf, and then I notice how absolutely botanically correct everything is. This is the way the leaves look. So looking at that American beech leaf at the end that you said is 30 different pieces of fabric, look at how those veins are totally parallel, they're totally straight and precise, and then each one ends in a tooth. And then if you look at the leaf to its right, that is a sugar maple leaf. I grew up in Vermont. That's our official tree. I grew up drinking sap out of the bucket on our dirt road. I always tell people the sugar maple, if you're having trouble identifying maples, and we have several maples that grow in Rock Creek Park, if you're having trouble telling them apart, give them the Canadian flag test. That is the leaf on the Canadian flag. And the samaras for the sugar maple are behind you there, and all maples produce these winged seeds called samaras that grow in pairs like that, and they have amazing aerodynamics. I'm sure you've seen them whirligating through the air. And the way, the shape and size of the samaras and the way they attach tells you what species you have. So those are the sugar maple samaras that are like a U shape or a horseshoe shape. And then here are the Norway maple samaras, and they're more like angel wings. Are you giving me the invasive? They are invasive. And there's the leaf. See how that leaf? This is the leaf that, and they were probably the ones that were invading your house.
Yes.
This is the leaf that is often confused with the sugar maple. But does that pass the Canadian flag test? No. But you know what I learned today? That the sugar maple is the one on the Canadian flag. Somebody goofed when they did the Canadian currency, and they used the Norway maple as an image. So take a look at the $5 bill or the 20. They have the Norway maple on there. These behind me, and I won't talk about every leaf, although I would love to. But here is a New York fern. And we have a mnemonic for the New York fern, for the frond, that New Yorkers burn their candles at both ends. So you see how that frond is tapered? at the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
And today are you giving me the hook?
No, I just
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, so, see, New Yorkers burn their candles at both ends. Today I was in the park, I saw, this is a white oak leaf, this is the official tree of Maryland. I saw a leaf of this exact color. Look at this color. Look at this color that you've captured. And you know, the white oak leaf looks like that in the spring too. When it first comes out, it has that color. And then it has it again in the fall. And the sassafras leaf, when you walk in the park now, you were talking about looking down. It is a smorgasbord. It's like the yellow brick road because that tulip tree leaf back there, look at that glorious shape of that tulip tree or tulip poplar leaf. The yellow leaves have fallen in the trail, and you will see if you walk in Rock Creek Park now, you'll just be walking on the yellow brick road of tulip tree leaves, sassafras leaves, sugar maple leaves. I saw sugar maple that exact color near the equitation field today. And what I really hope is that when you leave this room, I hope you'll come back and bring your friends here because the Writer Center is open from 10 to 3 every day, and this is going to be up until December 5th. Because when you look at these images, it does something to your mind. It's like the Canadian flag. You can remember the Canadian flag and the maple leaf on the Canadian flag. All of these leaves and fruit and the fern fronds here give us a search image so that when we go into Rock Creek Park, we can bring this with us and see the forest in a whole new way. So the forest can talk, and it spoke through Sophia, and here it is talking to us.
Thank you. So, one of the important things it's hard to follow that. One of the important things we now need to think about is how do we take this beautiful forest and bring it forward into its next phase, because the forest needs some help. And while the forest does a lot of rejuvenating underground through its network, feeding each other the nutrients it needs underground, it's losing a little steam. And one of the things I learned through our group of friends here is about the Forest Resilience Framework team. And I was so honored to be a member of that team as an artist, so I could be a fly on the wall and try to make sure I captured some of the trees that you all are focusing on. And what I would like for you to do is if the forest could talk, please tell us how the forest could become more resilient, because we need some hope here. And I know there's some good news coming.
Thanks for that, Sophia, and thank you for providing a little break between Melanie and me.
And I forgot to add one more thing. The Forest Framework Resilience Project that you are going to tell us about, Jeanne, is unique. It is the first of the kind in the national park. It's a pilot study. And the hope is that it can be used as a template for other national parks across the country. Okay, now you can go.
No, say more, Rick. Thank you. Yes. So for the last many years, great people have been studying Rock Creek's forest, and great people have been working in Rock Creek's forest, both paid, and we have an amazing volunteer here with us this evening. And if you look closely at the forest the way Melanie does, Melanie told me this spring that sometimes I need to take a break and tune into twigs, which I'm trying to do more frequently, and I recommend to everyone else as well. But if you really look at the forest, you can see that it looks a little different than it used to. If you look carefully, it still looks lush and green, but if you look, there is that amazing canopy that Melanie was talking about, and you can see the friends that you see around the room, both the human friends, but also the plant friends. But what you really don't see are all the other parts of the forest that you would expect. When Sophia goes out and looks at the forest, she finds on the ground the seeds and the leaves that have fallen, but we don't see as many shrubs, little trees, the mid trees. At forestry school, they taught me that forest should be like a lasagna, it should have a lot of layers. And Rock Creek's forest is really incredible, and it has this fantastic canopy, but it doesn't have that structural diversity, those layers. In scientific terms, the forests of Rock Creeks are in a state of probable failure. Now, the hand-wringing usually commences when I say that, because 96% of people in this area love Rock Creek, and what they love about Rock Creek is the forest that gives you the experience that Melanie was talking about. But what gives me hope is that probable failure means if we do something about it now, we can save those forests. So using all of the incredible science that the National Park Service has done over the years, other researchers both in Rock Creek and elsewhere studying forest dynamics, as well as the human urban forest interface, if you will, the ways in which we impact the forest directly and indirectly, and working really closely with Brian's team in Rock Creek Park, as well as others throughout the National Park Service. Over the last couple of years, we've brought together teams of subject matter experts, one artist, as well as any number of wildlife biologists, botanists, foresters, climate scientists, and also social scientists, because humans are such an important part of Rock Creek's forest, and the park is for us as much as it is for the wildlife. And we really posed the question to this group, okay, we know that the world around Rock Creek Park is changing. Rock Creek Park just had its 134th birthday. Doesn't look a day over 129. But it is starting to show its age, right? So how can we ensure that Rock Creek Park doesn't just survive another 134 years, but that it thrives? And we've put together what's in essence a strategic plan to save the forest. And it's pretty straightforward. Get rid of the invasive plants that are choking out and out-competing a lot of the native plants. Keep the deer at bay, and plant in sunny spots. It is very difficult to grow trees underneath a major canopy because it is shady there, so you don't get as much sun. And I am thrilled that we were able to use the framework as it was developed to be able to secure just over $1 million in Inflation Reduction Act funding to pilot test these resilience strategies for Rock Creek. And then we were able to leverage that Inflation Reduction Act, our Aunt Ira. I guess it's Uncle Ira, but whatever, ants are better. Use that to secure additional funding from the District Department of Transportation, but also from private philanthropists to really help us make sure that we can do this pilot in a way that we can work really, I'm gonna say assertively, not aggressively, across 100 acres of forest. We're working in 3 locations. One is in Glover Archbold, which is a part that many people don't know is part of Rock Creek Park. That's a small test case. One is in the main body of the park near the tennis stadium and the Carter Barron Amphitheater going down towards Beach Drive. And then our third is in Fort Totten, which is one of the Civil War defenses that's managed by Rock Creek Park. And that one in particular is in an area of our region that is incredibly hot. It has a lot of urban heat. So what we are doing is really trying to increase biodiversity in these forests by increasing the structural diversity of the forest. And by doing that, we're creating benefits for the communities around the forest. And in particular, we expect to add cooling benefits to the forest. If you look at a map of the region, I like to say that Rock Creek Park is literally the coolest place in town, right? Yeah. And you can feel that on days in the summer, right? When you go for a hike and you go in and suddenly, you know, not just your blood pressure drops, but the temperature drops around you. But different parts of, different neighbors experience that differently depending on what part of the forest you're near. So I am thrilled that we have this opportunity to try out and learn from the way that we can restore the forest across these 100 acres. And hopefully there's another 1,700 acres of forest to go after that. So hopefully we will learn something that allows us to work a little bit more efficiently and make some really big strides, because what we really need is to ensure that Rock Creek can handle whatever is in front of it. And thank you, Sophia, for being a part of it.
You're so welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. We couldn't be doing this without you. So thank you for telling us about the health of the forest and what we can do. We hear so much news about things we can't turn around. It's great to know that there are things that we can. So there's another thing we need to do in conjunction with working on forest health. Another thing the forest would say is, if the forest could talk, it would say, we need an advocate. And we happen to have a really good one right there. So it's very important that we have people that stand up for the forest on its behalf and ring a bell in the local and state level to talk about policy and laws. And we have with us this evening Josh Tolkien, Executive Director of the Sierra Club in Maryland. Thank you for being with us. It's your turn now.
Thank you so much. Sophia, I'm so thrilled to be here tonight. I missed the last exhibit with If Ferns Could Talk, and I've been lamenting that for what feels like 2 years, and I really enjoy the wonder that comes from being in this space to see these large, sort of oversized items that we come to just take for granted in daily life. You just walk through leaves on the ground, walk past trees, and then you stop for a second and appreciate just all the beauty and the intricacies. And I want to talk a little bit about how that relates to advocacy. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Josh Tolkien. I'm the director of the Maryland Sierra Club. Tonight's theme in this art piece is If Forests Could Talk. And what we've learned is that forests can talk. What they can't do is vote. They can't vote. They don't have strong representation in the halls of Congress or Annapolis. They don't have great paid lobbyists. And while I personally don't think that campaign donations should be considered speech, as long as the Supreme Court does, let's say they're not able to speak with their own mouth. We know all of the benefits of having thriving ecosystems. First and foremost, because they are beneficial in their own right. They don't just have to be beneficial to us to have benefit. But we also know that there's so many benefits. The Trust for Public Lands has done numerous studies finding significant health benefits for children and families that live within 10 minutes walking distance to a park, and DC has done a phenomenal job. And that can be Rock Creek Park, or that can be a tiny little park with a playground. The second that a child has that exposure, that interaction to a natural space, so many of their positive indicators of their future go up. But we're also facing some pretty significant challenges. We have, at the local level, significant development. Maryland, just quick show of hands. How many people here are Marylanders? And how many people are from the district? So about 200 years ago, Maryland was 85% forest.
Oh, wow.
That is what people discovered when they first came to the region. We have seen significant deforestation, but we also still have a lot of thriving ecosystems, some of it on state parkland or local parkland, and a lot of it on private land. A group of Marylanders came together about 10 years ago to try to expand protections for natural places in Maryland. Maryland does not have designated wilderness, which is a federal designation, but we do have something called the Maryland Wildlands Program. And the movement was fascinating because it was not initially policy driven. It was driven by individuals sharing stories about what they experienced when they were growing up. Their experience walking around on a particular trail, maybe Cunningham Falls or Savage River Park or Patuxent research station, and they told about these stories and how important these spaces were to them. And then some folks drew maps and said, can you identify this space and that space? And they put together a proposal for the preservation of 50,000 acres in Maryland. And after the sausage making, we ended up getting about 20,000 acres protected under the Maryland Wildlands Program. And I share that because what was important there were the voices of everyday Marylanders talking about why this was important to them. Policymakers are dealing day in and day out with trade-offs, whether we're going to be funding our education system, what to be doing with diminishing funding for transportation. And for them to prioritize something like forests, it can't be abstract, it has to be personal. They have to be able to picture a constituent, or picture an artist, or picture a leaf. And at that critical moment when they're in some debate, they need to be able to imbue that with some value. And the art that you've made helps us blow up that, I guess, appreciate it at scale. And I don't want to say that something as small should not be appreciated at scale, but give it the gravity that I think it needs from an advocacy perspective. The story of Rock Creek Park's creation underscores this. It's the story of 130 years of interaction between I was actually pretty happy I was in the ballpark. Interaction between the federal government, the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and an incredibly complicated and intricate network of policymaking, adding more land, trying to coordinate the communication between the different counties to figure out what that political ecology was. Here's a little bit of a downer though. We could preserve a huge amount of land in Maryland and create a resiliency plan for Rock Creek Park, but we're still faced with the impending threat of climate change. And that's where we all need to zoom out and see ourselves as part of a global community. The good news is that Maryland has set strong goals for the climate action it wants to accomplish. There's individual actions that we can take, from our electric vehicles to trying to phase out our use of fossil fuels in our homes. And as we build out the technical ecology, such as charging systems, it will make it easier for the rest of the system to work. So we are pushing for more electric vehicle charging systems, for expansion of the electricity grid and a smart grid so we can all be able to power ourselves with renewable energy. We're trying to educate people about the interconnection between climate and forests and ecology. Maryland has set a goal through the passage of the Maryland Great Outdoors Act of preserving 40% of our natural places, putting it under protected status by the year 2040. And so we have these bold and ambitious goals. But I do want to underscore that what we really need is not more paid lobbyists and advocates like myself, but we need more individuals coming and bringing their voices in, telling their personal stories. As long as dollars are considered speech, we need your speech in the form of support for the Creek Conservancy and other great groups that are trying to lift up and speak for the trees. And I did promise my 9-year-old that I couldn't find my copy of the Lorax, but I was very excited to say my name is Josh and I speak for the trees. And I would invite anybody who's interested to talk with me about ways that you can help speak for the trees.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. And last but not least, we are thrilled this evening to have the superintendent, the acting superintendent of Rock Creek Park, to join us, Brian Joyner. And Brian has overseeing an amazing staff of people. A shout out to Anna Chukin, who's not here this evening. She has helped me immensely in this project. She's the botanist for the National Park. And then, let's see, Bill Yeaman, his 50th anniversary working for the park today, has a wealth of knowledge about the park then and now. And Nick Bartholomew, who was on the Forest Resilience Framework team. You've got an amazing crew working for you. And we have recently had a little experience with the sassafras tree, Brian and I. I was looking for this amazing, beautiful leaf, and Brian's like, "Yep, you can't take it off the tree." I'm like, "Can I jump up on the back of one of those trucks and just sort of shake the limb a little bit?" He's like, "How about a ladder?" I was like, "That's gathering." But bless his soul, the next morning I get this wonderful text saying, "Is this what you're looking for?" He had apparently found two beautiful sassafras trees leaves that were red, and they were right next to his car when he parked his car. So I guess the sassafras tree was talking to him. But anyway, we're glad you're here this evening to talk to us. And one of the things we're hoping you would talk to us about is sort of a big overview about the park. And basically, we need to think about the park in terms of, I'll make sure I get this right. We need to pay equal attention, not just to the health of the forest, but to what brings the forest to its demise. Data centers, roads, some of these things that we haven't quite brought up this evening. And I was hoping you could talk to us about that, and maybe a few other things.
So before we get too terribly far going down this road, I am not a naturalist or a tree botanist or anything of that nature. My background is in history. So when I come to this conversation, and Jeanne chuckles every time I talk about my burgeoning understanding about trees and about the forest and things of that nature. So please do not be offended if some of the language I use does not sound like someone who's a naturalist. I am not a naturalist, but here's what I know. I'm from Washington, D.C., and Rock Creek is, the beating green heart of the city of Washington. I was just at a conference in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, not a couple of weeks ago, last week, talking about the Carter Barron Amphitheater and some other things. The number of people who came up to me, not from Washington, from the United States, who had such a strong connection to the park, to the resources in the park, and the resources being the trees, the waterways, the roadways, and just spending time in the park. It was amazing to hear that. So what I find myself as a manager, as a resource manager, having to deal with is, how do I protect the forest? How do I protect the park from the very people who love it so much? How do I protect it? The road that runs through the park is one of the most beautiful scenic roadways you will ever see, but more traffic, more people, ultimately leads to more fragmentation of the park, of the forested area, the 1,700 acres that's contiguous, and then the additional 1,300 acres we have around. So Jeanne mentioned the work that's going on over at Fort Totten, Civil War defenses of Washington, D.C., bring the city of Washington at 1.68 forts. Almost all those forests now have trees that are almost exactly the same age. Wow. 150 some odd years. And in those places, you can see the demise of those forests, and they're happening rapidly and at the same time. So what's been fascinating as I've been in this position is understanding how we address these issues. But the Park Service does a lot of things really well. What we have not done really well is plan for how we repair and regenerate forests in places like that. But we do have a model. We have the Line 9 construction funding source, we have a repair rehab funding source, we have a cyclic maintenance funding source, we have all these funding sources to help us keep the buildings, the historic buildings, up and functioning and the resources associated with them. What the forest resilience plan to me ultimately should get to, and what Jeanne has drilled into, is that as we do these projects, as we do these pilots and show success with them, the ultimate goal is to get someone to say, hey, maybe what we need is a cyclic program for the forest, for the natural landscapes. And one of the things about that idea to me is that we have, so there are five administrative units in the National Park System in the Washington DC area. All of them have forest of some sort, except for the National Mall, it has trees, but not forest. It has forest of some sort, and all of them are having issues. Some are similar, some are slightly different, but they will impact all of the forest around here, all the trees we have at some point or another. So looking at how we scale up the work that Creek Conservancy is doing, that other partnership organizations around the city and around the area are doing, how do we scale that up to be able to impact some landscape level conservation is one of the more exciting things I see kind of playing out as we move forward. So, but as I mentioned, we don't have a dedicated fund source. We were fortunate from IRA. Uncle IRA was great to us in regard to the sports resiliency plan. But what we're really looking for is how we build on these successes, and we recognize that we are ultimately dependent upon the partnerships we have, not only with organizations like Creek Conservancy, but with organizations like Casey Trees and other organizations around the city that have similar goals to ours. You know, how do we make sure the forest stays healthy? How do we make sure we maintain the tree canopy? How do we make sure that we mitigate the impacts of urban heat islands as much as possible? How do we leverage all of that, all of those different partners, into creating a landscape level conservation program that, even though we may not all be contiguous, we are all connected. That is something that I think is going to be very exciting for the park. I think the work that's going on this fall and through the spring, winter and spring, is going to be really exciting. People have taken a great interest in what's going on. And I'll say that one of the things about the work that's going on around the forest resiliency and looking at the forest and contemplating what are the different ways we can go about trying to save the forest is that it's encouraged me to ask questions about what I've been seeing. I'm one of those people who just like, forest looks green. It's great. My father used to talk about this all the time. I don't care the weeds or the grass as long as it's green, right? He didn't care. But now I know there's a difference. And now that I know, I gotta do something, right? I can't just turn a blind eye to it. So, I appreciate the work you're doing, Melanie, Josh, your artwork. So she brought this piece into my office to show me sometime last year. It wasn't quite finished, but it was pretty close.
It wasn't attached to the.
It wasn't attached. It was just a big flopping around at 6 feet. And I was dumbfounded.
Yeah.
It was amazing because I had never looked at that closely at a leaf. But probably, maybe in biology back in 8th grade, right? But I hadn't really. And it was amazing to take a look at that piece. And now there's another piece that maybe had affirmed that that Sophia was good enough to loan the park that sits in over the mantle in the office. So I get to look at that, and all of a sudden it makes me have to contemplate, what do we do? What are we doing, and how can we do it differently? And how do we support other people who can do that work faster and at scale to us? So.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for all you all have been doing to help the park and keep our area green, hopefully without invasives. And now I'm going to pass the torch to you, my dear.
Wonderful, excellent. It is question time. I know a few people were trying to ask Sophia questions. But as stated earlier, Saving Rock Creek is going to take a community, so we need to hear from all of you. And Elena, do you have a microphone? Okay, excellent. Go ahead, stand up. Please don't move, unfortunately.
Oh.
It's okay, you can just talk really loud.
Mary, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, what can we do as a community about the invasives? Do you have programs where people can come together and spend a day pulling English ivy?
That is a Rock Creek Park question. Go for it, Jeannie.
Well, it's a Rock Creek Park and a Rock Creek Conservancy question. There are a few things you can do. One is you can say, what would Rena do? And if you haven't seen Rena Sagana,
The Weed Warrior Queen.
Rena is possibly the weed warrior. There is a program, so every Saturday morning, Rock Creek Conservancy hosts volunteer events. So you don't need any experience, all you need is long pants, long sleeves, closed-toed shoes, and we will put you to work in one of our mini oases, which are our demonstration restoration sites, removing invasive species. Oftentimes Rena is hosting them as well, she's a weed warrior leader. If you get bitten by the bug and you find it really fun to do that, we can train you in partnership with Lana Chukeen, the park botanist. The Conservancy staff can train you, and you can get a permit so you can go out on your own, usually in one of our mini oases or other sites where we already have people working, so there's that collective impact, and remove those invasive species. Our volunteers are absolutely incredible, but what we found is that volunteers can remove about 80% of the invasives in any given area of the forest. So that leaves 20% left. So park staff, conservancy staff, and sometimes we hire contractors, take care of, say that again?
Goats.
Goats are effectively contractors, and what goats do is get them ready for the herbicide application. They are cuter than most, I should mention, Elena is one of our wonderful staff who removes invasives for us, and you're just as cute as a goat, Elena. Sometimes we use tools like goats. They can get rid of that 20% of invasives that are either in places that are not safe for volunteers to work, that require techniques that volunteers can't use, tools that volunteers can't use. So you can support Rock Creek Conservancy with philanthropic gifts so we can do even more of this good work. And then the other thing you can do is take a look in the mirror. And by the mirror, I mean out in your yard. Almost all of the invasive plants that are found in Rock Creek are escaped ornamentals, or they're otherwise introduced by, might have stuck on you, the cuff of your pants, or your dog when you walk through the park. So removing the invasives at home, if you have garlic mustard in your backyard, pulling it out at the appropriate time, getting rid of the ivy on the walls of your house, and replacing whenever you have a chance, even if it's just a planter on a deck, replacing it with a plant that is native to this area is a way to create sort of a protective buffer around the park. So
Do you have lists that we could use?
tomorrow or Thursday, everyone who is here will get an email from Rock Creek Conservancy with links to useful information as well as opportunities to sign up to volunteer with us, to advocate with the Sierra Club, and to learn more about all the other great work that we're doing. So thank you, wonderful questions. Back there, and then Rena.
For Sophia, I think I noticed on the leaves are on canvas. Is that right? I mean you've painted I think white little circles on the canvas behind
Yes.
the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about your artistic idea for that and how it sets off the.
So when I made the first one many, many years ago, I made a fern, and I just thought, oh, I can't just put it on white canvas. It looks really boring. But it also, I wanted to give it a sense of place. And at that particular time, I was studying ferns, and a place in Dunbarton Oaks Park that I had gathered several ferns from, several different types of ferns from, was right downhill from where the upper garden, they had this whole like half acre of cherry blossom trees. So I don't know if you've been to Dunbarton Oaks garden, the official garden, the formal garden, the wild garden below. So it is where I was in the park with Dunbarton Oaks Park. Anyway, so the formal gardens had this cherry blossom area. And I just thought, that would be nice. I'll just put some cherry blossoms here because they are sort of under the cherry blossom trees. But then I realized later on it was like, this is a symbol of Washington, D.C., and it made sense as this is a park that's in the District of Columbia, the DMV area, so that's why I stuck with it. You're welcome.
We had a question from Rena, I think next, and then I see 1 and 2.
I heard something, and it may have been from you, that with climate change, our forests are gonna look more like North Carolina.
Oh,
Is that-
underwater?
Not this week, but is that,
Yeah.
there accurately, or?
So, one of the things that we looked at in the resilience planning for Rock Creek was, what is the future of this forest? If we know that in the next couple of decades, it will be 5 to 7 degrees warmer, for example. One of the reasons you get so many allergies when you move to DC is because we have so many different plants here. We're at the intersection of the southern end of plants that are more native to the north, and then the northern end of the range of things that are more common to the south. So as climate changes, we'll see a different assemblage of plants, and things, our climate will be more like North Carolina, so we will see, it won't necessarily look like Raleigh when you walk outside, but you'll see fewer of the more northern species. And that's as we're selectively planting things that are more common to the south, and sourcing from nurseries that are to the south as well, because the plants are more accustomed to that setting. Did you have a question?
Sandy, do you have a question?
The pilot areas that you're working on, I just to understand better the strategies you're using, I hear you're planting things from the south as things get warmer here. I think I'm hearing that the largest canopy trees are dying off because of the climate change. There's fewer saplings, so are we, what are the strategies you're doing to complete all of that?
Yeah, another great question. So the question was essentially, what strategies are we using in the pilot sites? And we're testing a few different strategies. But fundamentally what we're trying to do is take the stressors off the forest, and the stressors are deer, the invasive plants, which kind of quickly fill in any openings that come, and then people, right? As Brian mentioned, there is a huge appetite for enjoyment of the forest. Sometimes even the best meaning visitors do things that cause harm to the forest. So one of the things that we've looked at with Brian's staff is all of the different, if you think about an ice cube, right? If you have a big ice cube, it melts more slowly than a small ice cube. That's because it has more interior area. Large blocks of forest, intact blocks of forest, like that wilderness that we don't have in Maryland, are easier to protect because there's less edge to the forest. And in the forest in Rock Creek Park, there's a lot of fragmentation, so we have little ice cubes of forest, because people are making their own trails to go in and either get a little bit of solitude, or in a lot of cases, because there is no understory, that spot between two trees looks like a trail. People don't know any better. So over the next, hopefully by the end of December, but possibly in early 2025, we're putting trail signs that will look like trail maps. If you pick up a trail map at the Nature Center, at the heads of all of the trails around Rock Creek Park, so people know what are official trails, and we'll, after that, provide more funding to the Park Service so they can have signs at every junction of the trail. So if you don't see a sign, you don't go on what's not technically an official trail. So that will help people stay on the trail, which allows the wildlife that enjoy the interior area to be a little bit less stressed and make it less likely that you're bringing pests or invasive plants into the middle of the forest. Those canopy trees, it's like a nursing home in Rock Creek's forest right now, where there are all these mature, my apologies, there are all these mature trees that are reaching the end of their natural life cycle, but we don't have the baby trees coming in behind them in those spots. So we're kickstarting that regeneration of the forest by planting saplings and seedlings and protecting them from deer and from particularly dogs, so that they can mature. But we're planting in spots that are sunnier, so we're planting either where those where a tree has died and there's a hole in the canopy of the forest, where the sun can shine through, but we're also planting along the edges. And sort of different mixes of those strategies combined with, I think the most challenging thing is going to be, how do we make sure the trees get enough water when we plant them? I recently learned that you can buy something called tree diapers, which are even more expensive than baby diapers, but so much cooler. So we're testing a few different irrigation methods, and we'll be tracking the progress of all the different things that we do so that we can use the more effective strategies moving forward. And if you want to know, I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, as Brian knows, because he really loves coming to meetings with me and Nick about all of this. But you will all now get information from the Conservancy, and we'll have opportunities to take walks in the woods and see what's going on in more detail. Did we have another? Yeah.
Yes. Do you have some suggested other reading about how trees communicate, more about forest bathing, related subjects?
I always recommend starting with Melanie Chicas-Bradley's books, but I think she might be able to recommend a few others.
I am reading a wonderful book now called The Light Eaters. I'm listening to it on audio. Have you read it? You were nodding?
I'm listening to it.
Yeah,
also.
I'm listening. I don't know if you can get the book. I'm confused because I ordered a copy of the book, and it said I would get it in May. So, but you can listen to it, and it summarizes all this exciting research about how individual plants have different personalities. Some are more risk averse than others. It's really exciting stuff. So we are just barely learning about the awareness of plants, the intelligence of plants, their senses. They can hear, they respond to touch. These are all things that we didn't know about and were not validated by scientific research. And so there's a lot going on. And then the book, The Mother Tree, that's what you were mentioning, right? By Suzanne Simard. Do you all know about Suzanne Simard? And you can also listen to a wonderful TED Talk that she gave. And isn't it something like If Trees Could Talk, or something like
Just
that?
look her name up on,
Yes,
actually I
Suzanne
watched it
Simard.
today.
There's another
It's good.
book.
I just wrote them down so I can put both into the email.
What's that?
There's the other book, To Speak for the Trees by the Barrows Ford.
Yeah, I haven't read that one.
It's the best book I've ever read.
Oh, and you're gonna put that in the email. Can you say the title again?
To Speak for the Trees, and it's Barrows Ford. It's a double Celtic name.
Oh, that's cool. And also, I love Braiding Sweetgrass.
Definitely.
That's a wonderful book by Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Native American.
Native American botanist.
Doesn't she have one about moss?
She does, yes.
What is it? Writings? What is the title again?
Braiding Sweetgrass.
I may have to start a Rock Creek book club.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Let's do that.
That's a great idea.
To Speak for the Trees is Diana Beresford Kroger. Beresford Kroger.
I'm gonna Google that rather than trying to figure out how to spell it.
And does it talk, what is the,
She's a world famous botanist and
Mhm.
got into the Aurora Borealis, and she grew up in a Celtic background, and literally everything was speaking to her, and they go through. I mean, it's incredible.
that sounds wonderful.
Oh,
The Overstory, yes.
Richard Powers' blockbuster book, yeah. Jared, or did you want to ask a question? Oh, sorry. Okay, didn't mean to put you on the spot. Go for it.
So Brian,
Yes.
how come there's money for fixing buildings? I mean, what is the psychology behind that, for parks?
Sure. I think historically, we believe that nature will take care of itself, right? We used to believe that about water, water quality, we believe that about, natural, extracting natural resources, nature will take care of itself. So if nature, if the assumption is nature is gonna take care of itself, and we have to take care of the things that don't regenerate on their own, or that we don't assume have an unlimited supply. That's what we focus our energies, right? I mean, it's, there's the classic, classic statement about, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities, right? We care deeply about nature. The whole Park Service is built on the idea that, creating, preserving spaces for future generations of people, right? But the idea is that nature will be there, we'll go visit it, we'll go back home, we'll come back and visit it another time, we'll go back home. So where we felt, where the need for resources were, is maintaining the places that people use on a regular basis, right? That has been the case, that's been the case with the Park Service, the whole time.
Can I?
Yes,
If I may.
you may.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the early conservation movement in the US, the idea was you lock the wild places away and they'll be fine, right? Keep development out of them. I'm not sure that anyone contemplated a data center on the border of a national park, but the idea is you put things away. But nowadays there is no away, right? Even if you look at the most remote wilderness, there are fingerprints of human impact through either supercharged natural cycles from climate change or, deposits of acid rain, et cetera. So Congress isn't known for being like fast to fix, past ways of being. So I think that's really the genesis of philanthropic partners to the park, right? Is how do we fill in those gaps? Yes, Ms.
I
Stella.
have a really great softball question for you guys.
Please.
So, what is your, and I'm gonna look at each of you, most magic place in Rock Creek Park? Or if you don't wanna go there, your most special place in Rock Creek Park? Whoever might wanna answer.
Well, for me, it's the Boundary Bridge area. I have a loop trail that I walk on, and it takes me through the floodplain forest with the sycamores and the river birches and all the trees you find in the musclewood, all the trees you find in the floodplain forest, and then it goes up into the upland woods and the whole community changes. It's a really wonderful loop. That's my favorite. And I did want to mention too that Sophia has these amazing wildflower paintings here of our spring ephemerals that had pretty much been wiped out by a very bad invasive called lesser celandine. And the National Park Service has been eradicating it near Boundary Bridge. And now the spring beauties that you see there, the bloodroot, the Virginia bluebells, the Mayapples, they've all come back, the trout lilies, and it's just amazing to see the resilience. And I think we have so much to learn about resilience from nature, and I wanted to add one more thing about resilience in nature, and it has to do with twigs.
No, this is great, because this is gonna be our last question, so get all the
So Jeannie and I have this thing about twigs. We really like twigs. And right now, the trees, well, all the woody plants, the trees, also the spice bush that you find a lot of in Rock Creek Park, because I guess deer don't like it very much because it's too spicy for them. But if you look at the twigs now, they have their buds already formed for next spring. The buds on the trees, if you look at the beech trees, you'll see these elegant, pointed, mahogany-colored buds, and if you run your fingers along them, they're just smooth as glass. The maples, the oaks, look closely at the twigs of the trees because they have their buds for next year, and that is resilience, that they would put energy into the buds a whole year before, that those buds are going to be there through the winter until the spring. So I think that's a pretty wonderful resilience teaching for all of us.
What's your favorite spot, Sophia?
My favorite spot is kind of right down the hill from where I live.
Melanie and I went down there the other day. I walk out, go down the little lane I live on, and then go into the woods, and then either go left or right. I like to go left, and then you go down a little bit further. Basically, there's a canyon there of some sort. It's not quite a canyon, but
It's amazing.
and you go down there and then go all the way down the bottom of the hill, and there's this little creek. And it's not Rock Creek, but it's a tributary of something.
Reservation 630.
Yes, the spring from Reservation
How
630.
poetic.
Thank you for that, I appreciate that.
We're working on it.
And you hop across a few rocks at the bottom there, and you can't see any other place. It's like all of a sudden you're in the middle of the wilderness. I love that. And you don't hear the cars. If there was a really low-flying jet for some unfortunate reason, you might hear that, but you don't hear the cars. You hear the water from that stream trickling, and then you walk along the bottom. And depending on the time of the year, you might see some mayapple, or you might see some Christmas ferns because they're suddenly popping up, or you see a lot of jewelweed, which was what the Native Americans used to use as an anecdote for poison ivy. Don't get too close to the trees. So it's just heavenly down there, and it's small, it's intimate, and I just kind of feel completely enveloped by the forest. And then you walk a little bit further, and then you come out, and you're at picnic area number 1. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So that's my favorite little spot, and there are others too, but that's the one I frequent the most. So. Do you have a favorite spot, Josh? That might be putting you on the list.
No, it's okay. I used to live in Mount Pleasant, and we would pick up Rock Creek Park and close to Beach Drive, right near the zoo, and go north. And when my wife and I first got married, we would every Sunday do a bike ride up from there, and then I think park our bikes around like picnic area 7 or 8, and there's a couple of trails that we would take. I hope they were trails. You guys will find out. The labeling. I also just wanted to make 2 quick advocacy pitches. I can't help. Those of you who live in this area are most likely represented by Delegate Mark Corman, who is the chair of the House Environment and Transportation Committee in the state of Maryland. There have been several bills in the last couple of years trying to focus on the types of species that are being planted by state and local government, as well as the State Highway Administration. And despite the amount of money and focus that is happening on resiliency, we still actually have a lot of our state governments planting invasive species. And so there is a really big opportunity to be educating a very influential elected official. And I say that not because I want to say that people are doing anything stupid or we can do better, but to say that you might be surprised at some of the low-hanging fruit that has not yet been addressed when it comes to advocacy around native and invasive species. So while that might be demoralizing on one hand, I find it encouraging because I think there's a lot of opportunities for progress. That's my closing pitch.
Teddy Roosevelt Trail. If you go down a little bit lower, as opposed to taking the upper portion, which you're not supposed to do, by the way, but I was overdoing invasive removal. So I was in uniform.
Sure.
In uniform, I was. But it was one of my first experiences in the wooded area as an adult by myself. And I remember I was walking through and I'm looking to cut some grapevine, I think it was grapevine was. And I startled a pheasant. Or let me rephrase that. This pheasant startled me. So I screamed, and then I kind of just sat there and looked. I was like, wait a minute. I'm walking past birds, I'm walking past all these different things. This one I just happened to piss off enough that you got left. But I don't think I did much invasive removal after that point, but I did a whole lot of walking. And it was just amazing to kind of look at, you know, it's like the leaf litter was, you know, probably this thick, and I'm just kind of crunching through it, and I'm stepping over, you know, the fallen trees, and I'm looking at the creek, and I'm looking at, you know, the stone, you know, the stone face that has a trail running above it, going above it, and people were walking there, and I was just like, wow, you know, this is in the middle of Washington, D.C. How lucky are we? But don't go walking down there and take the trail.
Stay on the official trails. I'll share a magical moment because I don't have a favorite place and they're all equally special. Years ago when my hair was not as gray and it was longer, I had it in a ponytail and I was running early in the morning up the Primrose Trail, which puts you out on Grub Road right by Parkway Deli, is the most useful landmark. And I felt this hand come on my shoulder and I screamed like I was going to be the next Chandra Levy. But a moment later, this barred owl, it scraped my cheek, because I guess it heard me screaming, realized I was not a mouse or a squirrel, and it landed silently on a branch in front of me. And it was like the fastest terror to absolute joy that I've ever experienced in my life. And was really just this incredible moment where I've never really felt like prey before, and I had my moment to realize it
That's
was terrifying.
That's a serious. Good luck.
Yes, so now we must go save the barred owl's home so that they can have much more food that is not on my head. So thank you, Sophia, for bringing us all together. Thank you all for being here. I think we're a few minutes past 8:15. I promised we'd be done at 8:15. So everyone, if you wanted to watch the debate, you could get home and watch the debate. Or if you want to ignore the debate, you can come watch the end of my son's soccer game. I'm going to run out too quickly, but everyone else is welcome to stay for a few more minutes and ask questions one-on-one.